Man, Andre, good to see you again.
Thank you.
The first time we did an interview, you would know exactly how many years ago. It was probably about maybe 4 years ago, after the murder of your brother, Che Taylor.
About 5 years ago.
5 years ago, okay. I knew you would know.
Yeah.
And I did an interview with you there at C-Spot. And the focus of the interview is like basically this guy, Andre Taylor's making a lot of noise, but does he have the stamina to last? If you remember the article, it was like, does he have the stamina to last? Because he's saying and doing all the right things, but he's ruffling a lot of feathers. But is he going to stay the course? Or if this change he wants for his brother comes through, is he going to, move on with life? And I must say, and I'm going to see if I can retrieve that article from our C-Spot from 5 years ago. The question that I asked then, is Andre Taylor here to stay? Clearly, you've answered the question. 5 years later, you're here. Something that was street level then, when you were trying to basically get some sort of justice for your brother, has turned into something that people in this state have never seen, and maybe nationally with the passage of I-940. From there, you've gone on and did different community-based things where you've brought national speakers here, conversations with the streets, to be able to bring people all the way from Rizza Islam and different people down here to meet and communicate with our marginalized community here in Seattle. The latest thing, amongst probably many other things that I didn't highlight, is that the mayor has named you the Street Czar of Seattle. People know it's a lot of civil unrest here in Seattle. The catalyze, there's a lot of fires that are burning because you come from that space. Your work with I-940 is a lot of tension in the streets already. And it came to a head with the murder of George Floyd in the Seattle protests. All that being said, Andre Taylor, tell us a little bit more now about the Street Czar position. What is this all about?
I got the Street Czar name from the Obama administration because every president had particular czars, education czars, drug czars, and I said that would be an interesting thing to have. A street czar is really a person that is an in-between person between community and the city. What's important about a street czar, why I coined the phrase, is that it's an individual that have gone through some things in his life, have overcome some things in his life, and yet has a credibility because of the things that he's gone through and overcame. I have a friend named Big U that's in Los Angeles. He is responsible for 80% of the reduction of gang violence there, but he was a quote-unquote OG, an individual who was Nipsey's OG, that had been to prison and the like, but because of his influence and him turning his life around, working with the city of Los Angeles, I consider Big U to be a street czar. And there are many street czars unnamed around the country that need to be put into positions if cities would like to see some of the violence quelled, right, and a conversation continuing to be started.
So, but what makes the street czar position different from investments that the city is already making in different organizations whose main focus is working with the streets in marginalized communities? Like the city invests in community passageways and other programs like that. How is what you're doing, not this time, Andre Taylor Street Czar, different from what the city is already investing in?
The different thing is that Not This Time was able to lead Washington State and real change. What I mean by that, we led Washington State to become the first and only state with a police accountability law. That built credibility. The way we did that is by bringing law enforcement together, politicians, also unions, and building power, going to different communities, Asian Pacific Islanders, Latino communities, Black communities, white communities, to bring all people together, and that's called building power, right? And when we built that power, we were able to force law enforcement to the table to comply, right, to the desires of the community around the state. So in doing so, we were able to create actual history in the country by that narrative. Well, Not This Time and I led that particular movement into getting police accountability. That is not to diminish the great help, because no one is an island, of the 23 different organizations from Native tribes and De-Escalate Washington and the many different organizations that came on board. but it started with Not This Time from a grassroots movement, from the bottom to the top, not from the top down. So because of that, the Street Czar position has a certain amount of credibility because of doing the work, right? And I think when I propositioned the mayor about doing something that is transformative, something that could lead the rest of the country, it wasn't just me trying to sell the mayor anything. We had already worked with her with Conversations with the Streets. That was extremely successful, where we were able to bring Black leaders and professionals from all over the country to have conversations with our little community here, right? And so being successful with 940 allowed her to know that this could be something that's successful, being that we've done several things that have been successful.
Speaking of Mayor Durkin, the last few months, at least since May, I've covered most of her press conferences, and I see you at a lot of her press conferences. You appear to be somebody who's a go-to person around issues, I guess I would say, in the Black community, but then also other issues, because a lot of people who are protesting and things like that, they're not Black.
Yeah.
But can you explain more your relationship with Mayor Durkin prior to you coming on as Street Czar?
So I know there's many people out there that has claimed that this guy is a police officer, he works with cops, and there was something on Twitter that people were saying he's a cop. Well, what they don't understand is that I have worked with law enforcement, and I'm still willing to work with law enforcement for change and reform. I think that law enforcement has a place to play in reform. I'm not the type of individual that is an abolitionist that think that all prisons need to be done away with, or that mindset that all police need to be done away with. I don't want to be in a country where there is no type of law enforcement, because I'm from the streets, and not just in the streets. I've known of some psychopaths, right, that need to be where they are, right? So a lot of people never liked the mayors. They didn't like the mayor before this one, nor the police chief, nor that one before that, nor that one before that. I am not looking for the perfect person. I'm looking for an open opportunity, right, to engage. One of the founding principles and how I operate is that I don't believe that I have to agree with you 100% of the time in order to build with you. And that gives you a lot of leverage to build with a lot of people, right? And so when people are at this place now with, quote unquote, the protest of agitation that I've coined it, that are absolutely against any type of working or partnering with any type of law enforcement, then I become the bad guy, right? So the mayor and I definitely have a working relationship, because I'm only looking for the open door. I don't have to agree with her, and I don't, and she doesn't agree with me and everything. But wherever I can partner with her, law enforcement, other community groups, I want to partner there, and I want to build there. That's how that happens.
So how much influence do you have with the mayor?
Influence is a subjective word. You know, I can have a meeting with the mayor and at least propose an idea based upon the relationships that we have prior. And at least she will listen. She doesn't have to agree, but at least she'll listen.
Well, do a lot of people feel that the mayor has this relationship with Andre Taylor and the Black pastors to say, like, man, these are my Black people. Mm-hmm. These are my Black people. And because of that, though, right now as well, in this time of important decisions being made, especially that impact the Black community,
sure.
You know, I mean, this is why it comes up. It's like, how much is Andre Taylor influencing the mayor? She's getting ready to unveil her budget here in a week, $100 million to different, to community-led organizations. And so, how much influence do you have in our office?
As far as budgeting and those things, I don't have any influence. Like I said to you, wherever I can build, no matter how small that is, I think it's a great opportunity to build what we build. So that's what I do, right? We have a relationship, a working relationship that started with Conversations with the Streets, and we want to continue to build on that year by year, depending on what the needs are for the community at the time.
Right. And let's talk about de-escalation. What is your view? You know, you caught a lot of people by surprise. You had a press conference, and in the press conference, one thing is you asked Chief Best to come back, and she respectfully declined. But a lot of people were surprised about the language that you used during that press conference, and where you called some of the protesters agitators, and different kinds of words to describe them. What are you seeing out there? Are you seeing that protesters and protesting that's going on right now is still all about Black lives? Are you saying that it's something different? Are you saying that it is Black lives, but now they just want to agitate, or they've done different tactics? What exactly are you seeing out there?
I think that it's been kind of overwhelmed by the anarchists, and that they have used an opportunity, right, along with white liberals, to now push whatever agenda that they're pushing. I don't think it has anything to do with Black lives, right? Because Black people have been in this country for over 400 years, and we already know how we cannot operate. And we know we can't operate with violence. We've seen historically what happens if we try to push an issue with violence. So growing up, Black people would always say, your parents would tell you, at least when I was growing up, that if you're petitioning for a job, you have to be 10 times sharper than the white man. Well, this elevates the culture, right, if this is the focus. So the violence is more or less white folks that feeling their privilege and their ability to do so without the same type of harm that will happen to Black people. And that's my concern, right? I feel like the protest of agitation, and I didn't come up with agitation. There were people that have said that they are professional agitators, right? And that is a way that they feel they want to move. Well, we are in direct opposition to just agitation. We're trying to bring people together. And we're not guessing our way through what works. We've already have something that no one in the country has been able to do by bringing people together. So if people are adverse to the idea of bringing people together, they only have words. They haven't produced any actual change or legislation. We have. And so we're willing to put our work up against people's words, regardless of how angry they are, you know, because right now they're in this mode that, you know, we're going to agitate to get change. And it might work for a little while, but it's not a message that the country will receive if you're trying to do something in a nationwide platform. I'm trying to bring what we've done here in Washington State, take it across the country. The protest of agitation will not allow that to happen. But when you build and show people that you can bring people together and show people their power, show voters that they have the power to change things, and you give them, right, a state that's far leaning left with only 3.5% Black people in it, with a 60% vote on police accountability, 71% in King County, that's something believable, something tangible people can believe in. This is why I will refuse to bow to the demands of the protest of agitation.
Right, and this protest of agitation, for the most part, is confined to a geographic area in Seattle. I mean,
and Portland.
Huh?
And Portland.
Well, yeah, well, let's just say here, excuse me, when the traditional Black community is protests or demonstrates, Jimi Hendrix Park, on Jackson, on Othello, you get thousands of Black people who come out. There's no police, there's no incidents, there's no anything. Exactly. And so I just want to be very, very clear and concise here, is when you're saying this protest of agitation, I mean, for Seattle, you're mostly referring to what's emanating from Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I'm mostly referring to what happens when white liberals, people who are imposing law enforcement, and how they blend into peaceful protesters to attack law enforcement, and then law enforcement has to figure out who's who, right? Because they have strategized their plan to blend in with peaceful protesters. Most of those people have been white people because the makeup of our state, right? So you're absolutely right. This is why I said from the beginning, Black people do not operate like that. And to your point, that Jimi Hendrix Park, no police, a great time, no violence, right? To your point.
Right. isn't part of your role as a Street Czar to be able to work with this protestive agitation, these people that are there? Is it your job to bring them to the table?
Yes, my job mostly is to lead when it's uncomfortable to do so. When you have opposition, remember, I'm presenting something that works versus something that people are just talking about. And so when I sat down with quote unquote some of the leaders of CHOP, and they secretly recorded the conversation as if it was a got you moment, my secret conversation was consistent with what I say publicly, right? This is an opportunity. I can get you before the mayor. I know that there's particular finances that you want. Let's ask for that you can distribute those finances amongst community, right? And that will create you being champions, right? And I believe that to this day, I will still work for Black and brown communities to try to get wins, right? I am not an employee of the city. I am a consultant. So I have my own autonomy. I could speak freely the way that I speak. So as a Street Czar, you have to understand, I know that there are conflicting ideas about how you bring about change. I recognize that. But am I willing to stand up underneath all the pressure and all the heat to say, I'm not telling you this works, I'm showing you that it works?
Well, for me, I'm not somebody who's opposed to the city investing in de-escalation. As someone who was there on the Western Barricade, who got tear gassed and all kinds of stuff several times, it would have been great to have people who would have been able to strategically, in a big way, figure out ways to de-escalate, build space in between people. So don't really have any issue with that. But what's really thrown me is, like I said, in the release from, I think it was the Department of Neighborhoods, is that it locked you in to this geographic area. I'm sure that your area is much wider, but in the release it said Capitol Hill. And so, somebody was from the Central District, from the streets, 29th and Jackson, James A. Garfield High School. When I read that, it was like, well, when we read streets, we think, people in our community that are real street, doing the most. And then when we read the release, it says Capitol Hill area. And so that's been a bit of confusion, not only with myself, but other people in the community, because It's like, if we have this Street Czar, if the city is investing money into this Street Czar, to this de-escalation specialist, to a nationwide leader in being able to bring people together for meaningful change in a state like this, 3% Black people, and you get this turnout for I-940, why is the city putting their investment in Capitol Hill when there's more shootings and homicides in Seattle, all King County, but in Seattle in the last 4 years? Like, we're literally dying at least once a week here. So can you sort that out? Can you understand kind of where I'm coming from, that when you read it, it says Street Czar, but for Capitol Hill neighborhood? Did you read all of it?
Huh? Did you read all of it?
Yeah, I read some of the boilerplate, but that's
okay.
But that's what jumps. But this is what I'm saying,
right.
And so because the general public didn't read all of it, and so the general public reads Capitol Hill neighborhood. So I'm allowing you an opportunity to explain exactly what this is.
So I don't think that the Street Czar, quote unquote, is relegated to any particular area, but within, right, Seattle, King County, right. No one ever told me, the mayor, no one else from Seattle neighborhoods, that I'm relegated to Capitol Hill. In my work at Not This Time, we represent families that have lost loved ones due to violence, police violence. We created that space. There was never a place here that families can go once they've lost their loved ones. We created that space, supported those families, and that's been from the south end to the north end, and even outside of the metropolitan Seattle area, right? So one thing is a Street Czar, but I do have a regular job as well, right? At Not This Time, and what we support and what we've been supporting for 5 years, doing the work that we've done, the changing of the inquest process, right? Making sure that families that would have never got any exposure got the exposure that they needed when it came down to their family members. Even to the last situation with Horace Horace Anderson's son, Lorenzo, who was a 19-year-old child with special needs when he was killed. And no one said anything or done anything. He called me up for my help, as other families have. Because not this time, don't reach out to families. They have to reach out to us. And I wanted to make sure that given the opportunity that we elevated his case. And we did it through Sean Hannity, and people from Seattle went ballistic.
Yeah, it was something interesting to see you on Sean Hannity.
But it was powerful because it wasn't about what they thought. It was a human story about a man who lost his son, who was grieving. It was not about politics. It wasn't about Democrat or Republican. I've been told that it's one of the most powerful moments in TV history. And, you know, that's just what happens when you are coming from such a leftist idea of how you think people are supposed to move. I'm a moderate. I believe working with all people, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, whatever, right? So my job is to elevate and be there for families who had nowhere to go. There's no other organization doing the work we're doing with families, none, only not this time.
So will the Street Czar also be present if required in the Central District and South End of Seattle?
He's already required. I've been working on some particular things right now for our community. I'll give you a little, and this is something I haven't presented to the mayor. I'm waiting for our appointment, but let me share with you. What we've been working on for the last couple of months is mental and behavioral health. I've been working with a young black brother named Gregory Jones, who has an organization called Lucid Living, who is a nurse who specializes in behavioral health, mental health, and also Daryl Bell, who works for Union Gospel Mission, who used to be the director of the New Vision program that Union Gospel had. And what we're trying to do is to create kind of like a FUBU, for us, by us, mental and behavioral health model where our people are at the helm, working with people coming from prison, going into prisons first, working with the steps and where we lose people. See, the steps are A to B and we lose people in C. We want to work with the C and then create a model after C where we can help people over a period of time get back into the community, right? And it's a big deal because it's us, our people, that allows our people to feel like they can take their guards down, because a lot of times when they're dealing with white people, they don't want no parts of it because they don't trust. And so just being able to work on this before I'm even telling the mayor, I'm telling you, you know, some of the stuff is on the board right there of the work that we've been trying to nail down. And so I'm very excited to be able to present this idea for our community that specifically focuses on our community and the needs and the trauma that have not been focused on for 400 years, and having you know, people with a certain amount of gift and professionalism in those specific areas, partnering with Not This Time. And that's what we're working on. It's a big, big deal. And we're hoping that the mayor sponsors it, right? So that's, but no matter what everybody is saying, I make sure I'm in the lab creating new things. Given the opportunity, given the ability that I have to reach the governor, to reach all these people, what am I doing with this quote unquote influence? What am I doing? How am I utilizing this? I want to make sure I'm doing something specific for our community so that I can then present to the mayor and then present to the community, you know, something that we're working on that's extremely big that hasn't happened before. So that's some of the things we're working on now.
Right. Now, your contract, consulting contract, $150,000 a year, this beautiful office space right here, you know, where we do our morning show every day, so we get a lot of real-time social media feedback from the public. We got a lot of people who are like, man, why isn't this guy out there doing this for free? You know, and this is black community, like people I know from the neighborhood who are making these comments, so not just randoms. So, man, why isn't this guy out here doing this work for free if he's really about the work? And then we got other people in our community who's like, man, that's it? 150? Sure. Where do you fall in on all this?
I think that we've been so conditioned to work for free. This country is a country of capitalism. right, that wants to sponsor your genius. People go to school, they get an education, and whatever they work for, there's a value attached, right, to that work. In past, and still going on now, black people have been required to utilize their genius and their expertise, and they haven't got paid for it, while white people and white organizations get all the money and never impact our community. And I just felt like, not this time, right? And if there is a little legacy left, I want black and brown people to understand whatever you contribute to society, there's enough money out there to make sure that you're compensated for your genius and your brilliance and your abilities and your skills. But they want to make us feel guilty while they keep getting paid. You will never ever have an issue with another nationality feeling empowered by what they have to offer because it is attached with value, some type of value. But we, a lot of times, come up out of a victim's mentality and we don't feel like we deserve the same as other people. But I know I deserve the same. And my genius might not be theirs, but it's mine. And it's enough to have led this whole state with history. So no matter what anybody is saying, no one can diminish the fact of the work that we've done. No one. And for that, if you want to utilize my social and political capital, you think I'm going to give you that for free? That'll never happen. It'll never happen. And you're not going to make me feel bad about the value of what I have to offer. That won't happen either.
Right. Now, you mentioned the protest of agitation, and you've clearly called out the things that you feel that this particular groups of protesters are doing wrong. I mean, do you have any position on...
Well, let me just stop you there. I'm not saying doing wrong. I just think that they have a different method,
okay,
right, of doing things. If you can recall the secret recording, right, I was telling the quote-unquote leaders that I felt were leaders of CHOP that you should not leave without a win. In other words, I believe in what you're doing, but it needs to be tweaked a little bit. Because anytime violence becomes associated with a movement, they can destroy it. And this is all I was trying to tell the people at CHOP. And I was more concerned about the people of CHOP because they were black and brown people. And there were black men there with guns, yelling on cameras, threatening. And that was problematic to me. Because I remember in 1984 where they dropped the bomb on them brothers and sisters down in Philly. I understand the history of this country. I know what they did to the Black Panthers and the like, Fred Hampton and the like. And so I was going to try to make them understand that you cannot continue like this. This is problematic, right? So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. What do you think, let me preface this, is that it's hard to find people who were there June 1st, either in person or saw it on TV, and indirectly, the city, certain city officials have definitely said that they did not approve of the police tactics on June 1st when they deployed that tremendous amount of tear gas, which most people, observers and people who were there, say totally disproportional. Gas went everywhere through there, impacted so many people who weren't even part of the protest. It's a gas. Yeah. It went somewhere everywhere. Now, what I have heard you say is you've mentioned, and not necessarily this group that you talked about right here during CHOP, but the people that are out there right now in the streets. Mm-hmm. I mean, and you've talked about some of their tactics and everything else, but what are your thoughts on the police and how the police have acted throughout this protest season?
I don't want to diminish what you're asking me, but you're talking to a African American black male with a history in this country. And when you're asking me, how do I feel about the police that have put tear gas on people, I would then ask you, how do we feel about the history of abuse of black and brown people in this country that have been lynched and been killed. And not that I'm numb to the tear gas. I think that's wrong. But it's deeper than just the tear gas. This is why I say that the narrative could be easily taken, because while the tear gas is bad and most white people were the ones responding to that, it's hard for them to understand that there are things that have happened that are 1,000,000 times worse that have happened to us and continue to happen to us over the 400 years that we've been in this country. And so for me to say, yes, this is wrong, but don't lose the focus out of the original sin. Don't lose the focus from the tentacles and the monsters that were created from the original sin that my people have had to deal with for 400 years. And you're over here crying about tear gas for 2 months. So I need to really balance that and not let people go as far as they want to go because it becomes white fragility. You know what I'm saying? I want them to focus on it's bad that the tear gas was there. But did you have anybody in your family drugged to death? Hung to death? It's a hard sell to places around the country that have more a predominant population of black people, because they're feeling like, yeah, we get it. We get that. And you are getting that too, to some extent, but never to the extent that the history shows what this country has done to us. And don't lose focus, because you'll be so caught up in what you think have harmed you, minimizing harm that has happened to black and brown people for over 400 years. And we can't let that happen.
You went on media and said that you wanted Chief Best to return. Not actually, is before her official retirement, not to retire and to resume her post as Chief of Police. Why?
I consider Chief Best to be a friend. I think that is saying something that historically she is the first black chief. And like I said to you earlier, no one likes the mayor or the chief before these people. You can go 10 police chiefs, 12 police chiefs and mayors back, and you'll get the same story. Nobody liked anybody. I don't want to play that game. I had a relationship with Chief Best. In the beginning, it was kind of trepidation because she really didn't know who I was. I didn't know who she was. But as we got a chance to know one another, right, I felt like I knew what she had had to go through as a black woman in a field that she's been in. And I didn't want to discount that. Let me please turn this down. Sure, people have made mistakes. I don't think no one can be exempt from the mistakes. You know what I'm saying? But given the fact that what was given to her, a system of supremacy, white supremacy within law enforcement given to this black woman, and for me as a black man not to support her, unconscionable. Unconscionable. I don't care what nobody said. You know, I'm going to support her, and I supported her to this day and will continue to support her, right? Because I'm thinking more than just the excitement of the moment where there's frenzy going on. And you know who your friends are then. Within this frenzy, I wanted to do a press conference. We wanted to rebuke, like my sister DeVita Briscoe did, some of the folks that needed to be rebuked, and we were going to stand on it regardless of whatever the pressure and the heat that we got, because it was a principled decision for us.
Right. Just a few more questions, Andre. Appreciate you taking the time. I want to ask you a question, and I'll let you know. I asked the director of OPA, Andrew Meyerberg, the same question the other day. So it's a question I've been asking all these officials downtown. But for you specifically, we get comments, like when we ran the clip from Channel 4 when it was announced, we ran Channel 4, and one of the things people brought up was credibility. You know what I'm saying? What's this guy's credibility? Is credible in the streets? So I asked you the same question, like I said, that I asked Director Meyerberg. It's like, how credible are you?
Listen, my mom was a pimp. My dad was a pimp. My dad was a prostitute. My dad was a pimp. My mom was a prostitute. My dad was a pimp. I come from the gutter. I lived that life, overcame that life, overcame prison, overcame the streets. And it wasn't enough for me just to talk about what change I wanted to have. I had to put the work in. I've been married 22 years. I have a son graduated from Yale, a daughter who graduated from UCLA. I teach young folks right now that you don't have to be defined by your past. I'm not going to allow anybody to define me by my past. It was a past, I lived it, it was wrong, I overcame it. And not that I just overcame it, I put historic work in that no one in the country has been able to do. And if that's not credible enough, to having come from such a place that most people never get out of, never, right? Some of them fall through the terrain of the street life in the ghetto. And I've been able to get out of there and tell my story as often as possible, knowing that if I tell my story, there will some that will be in backlash against me. But Malcolm X told his story. He was a pimp called Red, and he became a statesman. Who am I? I'm not comparing myself to Malcolm X by no means, but who am I not to tell my story, to empower young black brothers in the street, to show that you also can overcome whatever you've faced in your life. That's the most important thing to me, is to empower my people. And they need an example of change. And I'm going to represent that to them. It might not be sufficient to the average person. It might not. And I'm okay with that. Right? But I didn't come for them. And I didn't come for perfect people. I came for wounded people, because I was one of those wounded people, having to grow up in an environment that was forced upon me as a child and navigate my way out and through that, to then understand what my life is to be, having a wife that has been supportive of me for over 22 years, and we've lived a married life happily to this day. So it doesn't matter what anybody think about me, I'll let the work speak. I can't continue to come before people every day to try to justify myself before them. God has forgiven. God is the great forgiver. If they feel like it's not good enough, they can take that up with the Most High. They could take it up with the Most High God. You know what I'm saying? There are many people that I know in my community that have overcome great tragedy, great mistakes, and so, I mean, that's pretty much all I can say about that, brother.
All right, Andre. Anything I didn't cover, anything that you want the public to know?
No, I think you got it all. You asked great questions, and it's been a minute before we can get to this.
All right, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.